But let's just bring you up to speed on the full story. Donald Trump's first 40 days in office have seen a host of world leaders visit the White House, from the King of Jordan to the President of France. Emmanuel Macron seemed to provide a diplomatic blueprint for others to follow. And as we've been hearing today, it was Sir Keir Starmer's turn. Even before his arrival, he looked to impress Donald Trump by agreeing to raise UK defence spending. And he talked about that earlier in the press conference. It helped the meeting get off to a good start. But there were still doubts Starmer could get what he really wanted, a security guarantee for Ukraine. Donald Trump had dismissed the idea just a day earlier, but it turned out Starmer had an ace up his sleeve, an invite for a state visit from the King. Trump, who's often spoken of his fondness for the royals, duly accepted. This was the Prime Minister's way of trying to keep alive the so-called special relationship. And we heard a lot about the special relationship there in that press conference. Now, the idea that Britain and America cooperate, but would it convince Trump to stay close to his European allies? Well, during Trump 2.0, there have been doubts. The US president has spoken of new priorities away from Europe, and the special relationship didn't look like one of them, even with pleasantries and gifts from Britain. Well, as the two men met today, many were wondering, could we be about to see a breakup? And what would Starmer do if Trump's answer to providing Ukraine security was simply no? Let's just look at what happened in their first meeting in the Oval Office.
Thank you, Mr. President. Can I say thank you for your hospitality, for your leadership? We have met a number of times, we've talked a number of times, and we have had a very constructive conversation. I'm sure we will today. And of course, our countries have been bound together for a very long time now. The closest alliance, I think, of any two countries when it comes to prosperity and security. And I know that together we will strengthen that even further. And on issues like Ukraine, thank you for changing the conversation to bring about the possibility that now we can have a peace deal. And we want to work with you to make sure that peace deal is enduring, that it lasts, that it's a deal that goes down as a historic deal, that nobody breaches, and we'll work with you to make sure that that absolutely happens. And it is my pleasure to bring from His Majesty the King a letter. He sends his best wishes and his regards, of course, but he also asked me to bear this letter and bring it to you. So can I present the letter from the King to you?
Thank you very much. Am I supposed to read it right now?
Yeah, please do.
I will do.
I've got to tell him what your reaction is, so I need to know. I need to know.
He is a great gentleman, a great, great gentleman. Oh, that's well. Well, that is really nice. I must make sure his signature's on that. Otherwise, it's not quite as meaningful. It is, and that's quite a signature, isn't it? Beautiful. He's a beautiful man, a wonderful man, and we appreciate it. I've known him, gotten to know him very well, actually. First term and now second term. Perhaps you'd like to say what that very important paragraph.
Yes, so this is a letter from His Majesty the King. It's an invitation for a second state visit. This is really special. This has never happened before. This is unprecedented. And I think that just symbolises the strength of the relationship between us. So this is a very special letter. I think the last state visit was a tremendous success.
It was.
His Majesty the King wants to make this even better than that. So this is truly historic, an unprecedented second state visit, and he wants to talk that through with you.
And that says at Windsor. That's really something.
Yes. What I haven't got yet is your answer. I do need to.
The answer is yes. Yeah, please.
Mr. President, you obviously can do business with our Prime Minister Keir Starmer. You said yesterday that the EU was constructed to screw the US when it comes to trade. What can our Prime Minister say to you to persuade you not to impose tariffs on the United Kingdom?
Yeah, did I use the word that you said, that bad word?
I think so. I'm sorry to repeat.
Well, I think that the EU, I've had problems with the EU because And we're not talking about, we happen to have a great relationship with you, but we do have problems with the EU because they've tariffed us. They do it in the form of a VAT tax, which is about 20%, and many other taxes. They sue our companies. They sued Apple, got 16 or 17 billion dollars, which was, I think, totally a ridiculous decision.
Can you see any situation where US forces could be deployed as a backstop in a peacekeeping operation in direct confrontation with Russian forces?
Well, there is a backstop thing. You know, first you're going to have European countries because they're right there. We're very far away. We have an ocean between us. But we want to make sure it works. So I don't know when you say backstop, you mean a backstop psychologically or militarily or what? But we are a backstop because we'll be over there. We'll be working in the country. We're going to be, that's a great thing economically for them because, you know, when you talk about economic development, we're going to have a lot of people over there. So we'll be working in the country. So I just don't think you're going to have a problem. I think when we have an agreement, you can say whatever you want about security, who's going to do it or on, and that's going to be a very pleasant conversation. The hard conversation is, will we have an agreement? And I think the answer is yes. I think Russia will agree, and I think that I really believe Ukraine will agree also.
So will you discuss AUKUS as well?
Just to follow up on that, if British troops are in Ukraine keeping the peace and get attacked by Russia, will you come to their aid?
If the British people are in Ukraine and they get attacked,
If British soldiers in Ukraine.
you know, I've always found about the British, they don't need much help. They can take care of themselves very well.
That sounds like
You know what? No, it sounds like it's evasive, but it's not evasive. You know, the British have been incredible soldiers, incredible military, and they can take care of themselves. But if they need help, I'll always be with the British, okay? I'll always be with them. But they don't need help. You look at their career. You have done very well over the years, haven't you?
We have. I'm very proud of our country. And but we've also always been there backing each other up between our two countries. That is why this is the greatest alliance for prosperity and security I think the world has ever seen. Whenever necessary, we've absolutely backed each other up, and that's at the core.
Could you take on Russia by yourselves?
Well,
all right, one or two more. Yes, ma'am.
In his remarks at the Munich Security Conference, Vice President Vance condemned free speech violations in the UK, particularly. Could you respond? What is your message?
I have an idea. We have the man right here. Come on. Let's go, JD. We're putting you on stage.
Great. Yeah, look, I said what I said, which is that we do have, of course, a special relationship with our friends in the UK and also with some of our European allies. But we also know that there have been infringements on free speech that actually affect not just the British. Of course, what the British do in their own country is up to them, but also affect American technology companies and by extension American citizens. So that is something that we'll talk about today at lunch.
we've had free speech for a very, very long time in the United Kingdom, and it will last for a very, very long time. Well, no, I mean, certainly we wouldn't want to reach across US citizens, and we don't, and that's absolutely right. But in relation to free speech in the UK, I'm very proud of our history there.
A snapshot of some of the highlights of the day. And our political editor, Beth Rigby, was among those inside the Oval Office asking the questions. Let's get the view now of our World News team. Our US correspondent, Mark Stone, is at the White House. Our defence and security editor, Deborah Haynes, is in Kyiv. And political correspondent, Serena Barker-Singh, is here with me in the studio. Mark, we'll start with you. Often I hear you off the back of these press conferences describing it as a tsunami of news that's coming out. And it very much felt like that. I mean, every time Donald Trump opened his mouth, it felt like another news line was coming out. But what we also heard over and over again was him reiterating that this was indeed a special relationship as far as he was concerned as well.
Yeah, that phrase that we talk about so much, don't we? But it did feel special today, and it really could have gone any way. I don't think at the beginning of the day, if you did, I asked British officials how they thought it might go, and they wouldn't commit to it going well because you just never know. But I think the day is now almost over, and I think British officials will be happy, and so too are US officials. I just saw Scott Bessent, the US Treasury Secretary, and I asked him from a distance, how do you think today went? thumbs up, he said. So that's good. Both sides seem happy. What more could you want? I mean, I guess the backdrop is, of course, the issues they were discussing are incredibly complex. Ukraine, trade, and Britain is dealing with a president who has certainly been transformative in the way he does things. He's certainly unconventional, and he certainly can be temperamental. But within that context, I think it was a good day, and I think people will think that Keir Starmer dealt with it pretty well. I mean, yeah, there was kind of the awkward moments came almost from just how fawning at times Keir Starmer, Prime Minister Starmer, was with his praise, kind of the wrong word, but the way he framed stuff, because he knows Donald Trump likes to be flattered. I guess the British kind of met Donald Trump where he is on that, and that moment at the beginning of the Oval Office where he produced the letter, the invitation from King Charles for what seems to be a state visit, but also maybe a pre-visit to plan the state visit, a visit to Balmoral as well. He knew that would go down well, and certainly it did. But from the news conference, what we didn't get from the Oval Office, but we did get from the news conference, was big lines on not just perhaps the UK avoiding tariffs, but perhaps some sort of a trade deal as well. Now, remember, a trade deal, that goes back to the Brexit days. After Brexit, Britain wanted to be able to forge a trade deal with America. It never really happened. Now it seems to be something that they are actively talking about. And then, of course, Ukraine as well. So much on that too.
Yeah, I mean, Mark, it did appear that there was a lot of pressure on Keir Starmer to get this right. He was almost sandwiched between this meeting at the Oval Office between the French President Emmanuel Macron and, of course, this trip that President Zelensky is going to make tomorrow to the White House. So he had to almost juggle the weight of all of that and all of the events of this week.
Yeah, and remember that the Zelensky visit was only announced, was it yesterday or the day before? So when this visit was planned, and up until a couple of days ago, the pressure of the Zelensky visit was not part of it all. Now, of course, it is. Look, I think Macron and Starmer are clearly two very different people. In their styles, and they dealt with the moment in different ways. There was a sort of bromance between Emmanuel Macron and Donald Trump. But what did Macron actually go away with? What were the sort of things he could take away from his visit? Not a great deal, actually. It went well, but not a great deal of actual tangible results from that. I think Keir Starmer, certainly Downing Street, will be spinning this as some real takeaways, whether it be on America's commitment to NATO, which appears to be strong today, although yesterday Donald Trump said forget about NATO. So, the commitments are as long as a day, maybe, but also on the trade deal. I mean, real genuine commitment there. And Scott Bessent, who's standing over there doing an interview with one of the Trump-friendly America networks, he seems pretty upbeat as well.
Mark, let's bring Deborah into the conversation. Deborah, you're in Kiev at the moment, just listening there to Mark's analysis and, of course, seeing the events of the day, Ukraine front and centre, certainly for Keir Starmer. And we heard a number of things from Donald Trump. He said he has a lot of respect for President Zelensky. He was asked if he, still stood by his remarks that President Zelensky was a dictator, and he sort of brushed that off and said, did I say that? There was a lot there for the Ukrainians ahead of their trip tomorrow that they will be analysing and pulling apart.
Yes, and I imagine breathing a sigh of relief, because it was a lot more friendly, wasn't it, than a week ago? And clearly that hinges around this minerals and rare earth metals that Donald Trump is so fixated on. And he did keep on repeating, didn't he, this claim that he makes that America has spent $350 billion in supporting Ukraine. It's a figure that Ukraine doesn't recognise. Ukraine does not believe it has a debt. So there is a divergence of views when it comes to the money. But when it comes to the matter of the fact that Ukraine absolutely needs to have the US on its side, then signing this deal and Volodymyr Zelensky getting FaceTime with President Trump before Donald Trump goes and speaks directly face-to-face to Vladimir Putin. That is a big win for Ukraine. And as well, I thought it was really interesting what Donald Trump said in the Oval Office when he was talking to journalists initially. And he said that he was going to be trying to get back as much land as possible from Russia, which is a different slant, isn't it, to what his defence secretary was saying 2.5 weeks ago when he was at the NATO headquarters. And he said that getting back all of the land that Russia has taken is an unrealistic goal. It's a sort of a glass half full interpretation of that, with Donald Trump saying that they're going to try and get back as much land as possible. Oh, he didn't say all of it, but I think that too will be seen really well, really strongly here in Ukraine ahead of this crucial meeting that Volodymyr Zelensky is going to be having tomorrow, when it's his turn in the limelight.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to come back to about that in a moment, because as you say, it is a slippery slope when we're hearing mixed messages come out from Donald Trump and then, of course, his defense secretary. I'm going to bring in Serena into the conversation, because Serena, one of the things, I guess, that many world leaders have learned dealing with Trump 1 and now Trump 2 as well, it's good to bear some gifts for Donald Trump when you get there. And that seemed to have gone down really well. In fact, I interviewed John Bolton, his former national security advisor, earlier in the day, who said, he loves the royal family. So offer that in some way because it'll go down well.
Yeah, you can tell they've done their homework, and not only a gift, but a visible prop to hand to him. He said in the Oval Office, "Shall I read it now?" And he did. But clearly that from that press conference, you can see he's taken it away, he's absorbed it, and it was mentioned 3 times in that short speech. So this has really gone down well.
And at the press conference as well. I mean, he mentioned it. He was very excited about it.
Yeah, I mean, it's clearly known about him that he does love the royal family, that he gets on with King Charles. They talk about environmental issues, apparently, is one of their shared interests. But that has gone down really well. And what does Downing Street get as a prize to come away with? A potential Chagos deal, a potential peace deal with this US backstop. That conversation at least started, potentially avoiding tariffs. And there's also been a shift in terms of tones, in terms of how Donald Trump is speaking about Ukrainians. He said that, yes, we handed over weapons, but the Ukrainians are brave, that they have to use those weapons and fight. It's a huge tone shift from calling President Zelensky a dictator. So I think Downing Street will be very proud, not only in their preparation, but what they will potentially come home with.
We talked a little bit there about the pressure on Keir Starmer, to get this messaging right, because they wanted in some way, after the last couple of weeks, calling President Zelensky a dictator, for example, not saying that Russia started this war. European leaders were very concerned about how this would go down. So we saw Emmanuel Macron there early in the week, correcting Donald Trump a number of times on a number of things. And so it was crucial that Keir Starmer get this right as well.
Completely, and you can see Sir Keir Starmer placing himself at the centre of these negotiations, brokering between the US and the Europeans, holding the summit on Sunday now. But I think that also does cause him some issues potentially as well. If they are going to avoid these huge tariffs, the UK will, but through a trade deal potentially. I think the Europeans who Keir Starmer has been cozying up to will turn around and say, hang on, that doesn't seem fair if we're getting slapped down with these massive tariffs, but the UK seem to get a free ride, essentially. We don't know what that trade deal will look like, but I think being in the centre of this does create more issues for the Prime Minister as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go back to Debs, who joins us from Kiev. And Debs, Serena and I just talking there about the kind of work that European leaders have put into trying to correct some of the messaging that was coming out of the Oval Office in terms of who was to blame. I mean, today we're hearing Donald Trump sort of almost shift the tone and talk about the fact that Ukrainians are incredibly resilient, and some of the things that you've pointed out there as well in terms of the land and whether it can be taken back. But no doubt Ukrainians are still going to be incredibly cautious here, because from one week to the next, the tone, the language can actually shift in the White House.
Yes, and Donald Trump, didn't he, kept on saying that he believes that Vladimir Putin will effectively be good to his word when it comes to a ceasefire deal. He was asked a couple of times if he thought that Russia would attack again, and he said that he didn't think that that would happen if they reached a deal. But I thought it was interesting, he also kind of caveated that a couple of times too, saying that he thinks that there will be a deal and it's going to happen quickly, or it may not happen at all, which, you know, points to he's obviously got in his mind that it's not a 100% guarantee that he can get this deal over the line. For the Ukrainians, they are going to be wanting to know with much more clarity what this US backstop, which everyone is talking about, is going to look like. Donald Trump seems to think that the minerals deal that he's going to be signing tomorrow with the Ukrainian president is going to pave the way for Americans to be here on the ground to, in Donald Trump's words, dig, dig, dig. He said there's lots of digging to do here. We actually visited a titanium mine, and I can confirm that there is a lot of digging to be done because this country does have a huge reserves of titanium in particular in terms of minerals. But he seems to imply that having Americans on the ground is as good as skin in the game, which means that Russia wouldn't dare try. He was asked, and I thought this was really interesting too, given that it's the UK, France, other European countries, maybe even Turkey as well, that have said that they are going to put forces, actual military forces on the ground as some kind of reassurance presence to ensure and monitor a ceasefire and make sure Russia doesn't attack again. He was asked whether if the British troops got attacked by Russia, would America then come to Britain's aid? And he kind of like half-jokingly said, well, of course not, you know, the Brits don't need the Americans to help. Look how, they're very strong, they're very capable. And it was a little bit awkward because obviously everybody knows, yes, the UK armed forces are incredibly capable, but they're also far too small, and they massively rely on the Americans for a lot of the Gucci stuff that they do. And I thought when Donald Trump kind of sort of half-jokingly again asked Keir Starmer that whether or not the Brits would be able to deal with a Russian attack, clearly knowing that, of course, they'd come to America for help. That too it's said in jest, but it's a very serious point. The Brits do need the Americans.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go back to Washington and speak with our Mark Stone, who, of course, has been watching all of the developments today. Mark, just sort of wrapping up everything that we've seen, and as Keir Starmer's trip there comes, to an end in terms of his meetings with Donald Trump, we've seen some awkward moments with leaders and Donald Trump over the course of the last couple of weeks. I mean, King Abdullah comes to mind, where he held this sudden impromptu press conference and put him on the spot when it came to Gaza. All eyes are going to be on President Zelensky tomorrow and that visit, because President Zelensky, made quite a risky move about 10 days ago when he said that Donald Trump, look, we respect you, we're grateful for everything America has done, but you are falling into this vortex of Russian misinformation. And that really went down badly with Donald Trump. He bit back and bit hard. So, this minerals deal, they're going to sign this deal about a deal, but I imagine Volodymyr Zelensky is going to look at Sir Keir Starmer's performance, look at Emmanuel Macron's performance and think, OK, I need to kind of take that approach when I speak to him tomorrow.
Yeah. They're all taking notes from each other and they're talking to each other. I wouldn't be at all surprised it's almost certain that tonight or before the visit tomorrow, Keir Starmer and Volodymyr Zelensky may well speak, or at least their aides will speak, and they will compare notes. We know that Starmer and Macron spoke after Macron's meeting at the beginning of the week. Incidentally, Donald Trump just emerged from the West Wing, an impromptu moment where he came out, not quite sure why he came out, but he came out, had a few words with some aides outside there, didn't say a great deal. One of the key focuses for Brits, but also for the Australians, is AUKUS, this incredibly important defence pact between the United States, the US and the UK, acronym AUKUS, which Donald Trump appeared in the Oval Office to not know about. I mean, it's a defence pact that goes back a long time. It's very important for those three countries, certainly for the lesser players, the Australians and the Brits. And in one question, Donald Trump appeared not to know what it was and had to seek clarity. Maybe he misheard. Maybe he didn't hear the question properly. That's the benefit of the doubt for him. But certainly our Australian colleagues over there are exercised, shall we say, about that particular issue. But I think in terms of the takeaways, the deliverables, this idea, this talk of a trade deal is clearly a big deal for the UK. Now, what does trade deal actually mean? Does it just mean a deal to avoid tariffs? Probably, but that alone is great. That alone is good news for the British. They want to be able to carve themselves out as separate from the European Union. If the EU gets massive tariffs, reciprocal tariffs placed on it, well, that's clearly not good. The Brits would argue for anyone, but what they want to avoid above all else is their own reciprocal tariffs from the Americans. And it sounds as though at least the contours of that are there, which I think obviously will be very good news for the British.
Yeah, absolutely. And Mark, on AUKUS, I imagine all the headlines across Australia will be that line that when he was asked about AUKUS, he said, "What does that mean?" So that's going to go down not so well in Australia, I think. Mark, Deborah, and Serena, thank you all for all of your analysis. You're watching The World with me, Yalda Hakim. We've got lots more coming up after the break. We'll hear from an ally turned critic of Donald Trump, the president's former national security advisor, John Bolton.
I'm David Blevins, and I'm Sky's senior Ireland correspondent.
It takes 60 minutes to cross the Irish Sea. It took the British monarchy a century.
I've spent 30 years reporting the journey from conflict to peace.
The political parties of Northern Ireland have reached agreement.
If there's anyone who might know how to fix Northern Ireland's devolved government, it's the American architect.
Changes in circumstance require changes in approach.
The end of the political stalemate, the start of a new chapter for Northern Ireland.
I confirm that I am willing to take up the office of First Minister. My election to the post of First Minister demonstrates the change that's happening on this island.
Catholics and Protestants on different sides, now facing the same threat.
If we both contract COVID-19 and end up in hospital, religion's nothing.
People here are adept at finding hope amid adversity. That's the spirit of a place that punches way above its weight.
We help you understand the world with us. A toxic blue-green algae now poisoning Loch Ness. It's breaking your heart what has happened here.
It is.
This is a vital resource, a national treasure, now fighting for its very life.
They are effectively surrounded by Northern Ireland, and that makes this the most unlikely of international frontiers.
If there's a hard border, I think it'll cripple the country.
Winter is coming. Welcome to Winterfell. It's an iconic location in this globally acclaimed drama.
Ophelia was the most powerful hurricane this far east in the Atlantic on record.
Sky News, the full story first.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News.
We are under Israeli military restrictions in terms of some of the things that we can film, but it's important to be in there. What a slow drive for the president as he approaches his golf club.
4 more years!
Free wherever you get your news.
I'm Mark Stone and I'm Sky's correspondent based here in Washington, D.C.
We're rolling.
Welcome to the world.
Our new podcast, starting now. It's very exciting.
Every week, we'll be reporting from the world's trouble spots.
We get to hold those in positions of power accountable, and we get to ask the questions that the audience, the listeners, want to know about.
And that's why it is so important that people tune in, come along for the road, come along for the journey. It'll be fun.
Welcome back to the programme. Now, one item on the agenda that Prime Minister Keir Starmer was surely fearing was the matter of convincing Donald Trump not to impose tariffs on the UK. The US President already announced 25% tariffs on the EU. During their joint press conference, Donald Trump was asked whether Keir Starmer did enough to convince him. Just have a listen.
Did our Prime Minister persuade you not to put tariffs on the UK?
He tried. He was working hard, I'll tell you that. He earned whatever the hell they pay him over there. But he tried. I think there's a very good chance that in the case of these two great friendly countries, I think we could very well end up with a real trade deal where the tariffs wouldn't be necessary. We'll see. But he earned whatever they pay him. He earned today. He was working hard at lunch. And I'm very receptive to it. I think in all fairness, in all seriousness, I think we have a very good chance at arriving at a very good deal. JD and Scott and Howard, all the people are working on it. And I think we have a good chance at arriving at a deal that could be terrific, really terrific for both countries.
Let's bring in our political editor, Beth Rigby. And Beth, you join us now. Good to see you. You were, of course, at that news conference. You asked Donald Trump and the Prime Minister a question, but you could really see that relationship between them. Even there, Donald Trump, we heard him say teasingly, he worked really hard. He earned, whatever they're paying him over there.
Yeah, look, there's a few things to say on that. The first thing, Yalda, is that going into this bilateral summit, those around Prime Minister Starmer were stressing that these guys genuinely got on well. They liked each other. And that Keir Starmer could say things to Donald Trump in private and not get his head blown off. That was the kind of mood music going into that meeting. And I think what we saw today in the Oval Office and then at that press conference was a genuine rapport between the two men. And Donald Trump seems amenable to Keir Starmer. Now, you might not have thought that would happen because Keir Starmer's a Labour politician. Traditionally, Labour has backed the Democrats. Trump from a very different political philosophy to that. But they seem to get on. And with Donald Trump, it's all about relationships. So that's the atmospherics of this all. And I think that Number 10 will have thought that this could not have gone better. Coming into it, there were two elements. Could Keir Starmer convince Donald Trump to put in security guarantees in a peace deal with Ukraine? That just hasn't been clear, with President Trump saying it's all about the deal. Once I've got the deal, we can talk about the arrangements. So he didn't really bite on these security guarantees. What he did say at that press conference was this peace deal will happen very quickly or not at all. And with that in mind, Keir Starmer will be hosting 18 European leaders in London on Sunday, and I imagine that he has got stuff to go back with from these negotiations with Donald Trump to discuss. But look, the big story that emerged out of this is trade, for sure. What the Prime Minister secured in there was a president who has been threatening allies around the world with tariffs, with him saying maybe we can work something out. He didn't completely rule out tariffs, but actually he said, what I want to do is a trade deal where maybe this could be avoided. That is a huge win for a Prime Minister that did not necessarily think he would come out with that. And also for a UK government that really need to strengthen trade ties with the US because they're looking for economic growth. So that is a big win for him. Look, on the actual substance on it, whether they can agree on things like food standards, NHS, not so clear, but Keir Starmer will be delighted about how this played out today.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for being in the room for us and asking those questions. Thanks again for joining us, Beth. Well, Donald Trump has made it clear that his top team will follow his leadership, saying there will be no exceptions. One official from the president's first term who refuses to hold back with criticism of his old boss is former National Security Advisor John Bolton. We spoke earlier as the Prime Minister prepared to meet with the President. I asked what advice he would have.
He has to keep in mind that Donald Trump is not like any other leader he's ever met. He doesn't have a philosophy. He doesn't do grand strategy. He doesn't even do policy the way most leaders of Western democracies do it. He's ad hoc, transactional, episodic. And he sees things largely through the prism of what benefits Donald Trump. So I think what Starmer has to do is think about how to appeal to Trump, not necessarily on the merits of what he wants to talk about, Ukraine or NATO or other subjects, Chagos Islands, but what is it that I can say to Trump that will get him to accept the position that I think is in our mutual best interest?
And what do you think those things are? I mean, already we're seeing, the Prime Minister, he said that the UK was going to up its defence spending, for example. It's nowhere near where the Trump administration is saying they want it to be. But do you think those sorts of things ahead of this kind of meeting does help and sets the groundwork?
Well, it's better than nothing, but getting to 2.5% of GDP for spending on defense by 2027 isn't close to the 5% Trump has called for. Starmer's got to think of ways to get Trump's attention. Like, for example, Trump believes he should get a Nobel Peace Prize for something. Obama got the Nobel Peace Prize in 2009 for no particularly good reason, frankly, and Trump has always wanted one. So Starmer could say, hey, I'll nominate you for a Nobel Peace Prize. That would get his attention. It's pretty clear that Trump likes the British royal family. I would say two of the happiest meetings he ever had in at least my time in the White House were his two meetings with Queen Elizabeth. If Starmer comes and says King Charles is inviting you for a state visit, his eyes will light up, and then maybe they can talk about Ukraine.
Yeah, and speaking of Ukraine, we are expecting Volodymyr Zelensky to travel to Washington and meet with Donald Trump tomorrow. I mean, he himself has been looking for clever ways for Donald Trump to have a stake and skin in the game when it comes to the Ukraine conflict. And that's why we've seen this minerals deal, for example.
What Zelensky really wants to talk about to Trump is security guarantees for Ukraine after a peace deal is negotiated. And I think that's a very heavy lift for him. Again, on the personal side, Trump thinks of Zelensky primarily in the context of the so-called perfect phone call in the summer of 2019 that ultimately led to Trump's first impeachment. And notwithstanding really very extensive efforts by Zelensky in the past 6 months to try and develop a relationship with Trump, no criticism of Zelensky. I don't think it's happened. Trump thinks he's friends with Vladimir Putin, says he trusts him when Putin says he wants peace in Ukraine. And since to Trump, all international relations are the personal relations between leaders of different countries, the odds are stacked against Zelensky, I'm afraid.
Yeah, and just help us understand that. I mean, he tweeted or put out an X statement, or maybe it was on Truth Social, about you, about how you'd enter every room. And he said, you would frighten some of these world leaders because they were convinced that you were ready to go to war with them. And of course, he has also rescinded your, security and protection for you. Where are things now for you personally? Because there are concerns about, Iranian threats against you, for example. Did that come as a shock for you?
Not really. Normally when a person's national security advisor and they leave office, they keep the Secret Service protection for 3 months or 6 months, some period of time, just to be prudent. The day I resigned in 2019, he pulled my Secret Service protection within hours after I had resigned. So I knew he had done it once before. It didn't surprise me. It surprised me a little bit. It came so quickly. But that's your basic Donald Trump. It's petty and vindictive. It will have a negative effect, I think, on other people participating in his government, that they could be left to hang out to dry, faced with a threat from a foreign adversary if they disagree with Trump. but that's the measure of the man.
Would you say that there is something in the idea that Donald Trump's approach is still very much mainstream? I mean, Joe Biden didn't go hard on Russia. President Obama didn't go hard on Russia. I mean, he famously tried to reset the relationship. So it's just Donald Trump's rhetoric, which is different from the other leaders. But his approach isn't necessarily different. I mean, even when you look at Minsk 1 and 2, you know, it was the Russians and the allied nations that were sitting across from each other, not the smaller country that was impacted.
Well, you've just described 12 years of failures of American presidents in the Obama and Biden administrations. That isn't the model I would follow. And in fact, notwithstanding Trump's rhetoric, we did impose a significant number of sanctions, new sanctions on Russia during his first term. He went along kicking and screaming. So he doesn't like to think about it now. But if we had not, for example, if we had in 2014, if Obama had responded strongly to the first effort to annex Crimea and take over the Donbass, if NATO had followed along, that might have deterred Putin in 2022. If we hadn't withdrawn from Afghanistan, which was a Trump agreement implemented, bungled by Biden in the withdrawal, that was a factor, I think, that clearly encouraged Putin to think he could go after Ukraine with impunity.
You've worked very closely with Donald Trump, Ambassador. Do you feel that maybe he does have some kind of method to this madness? There might be some kind of plan, you know, that he does see some kind of peaceful resolution, that he does see himself as some kind of peacemaker, whether it's in Ukraine or the Middle East?
You know, a lot of his supporters say all of these Trumpisms, he's really playing three-dimensional chess, and it's a very, very sophisticated plan. Look, he's playing regular chess, one move at a time. That's the way he does it. I described the decisions of his first term as like an archipelago of dots. You know, you can try and draw lines between them, but even he can't.
That was John Bolton, Ambassador John Bolton, Donald Trump's former national security advisor during Trump 1. Well, the Prime Minister's US charm offensive started long before he landed in Washington last night. In a bid to win favour with Donald Trump, the Prime Minister announced plans to cut foreign aid in order to boost defence spending. But what's at stake in this trade-off? The former UN humanitarian chief, Martin Griffiths, told me that there needs to be a significant reset in the way aid funding is managed. Have a listen.
This is new, where we have the USAID collapse. We have the UK Prime Minister a couple of days ago saying that pretty well the same is going to happen to the UK aid programme. And the result is, as somebody has recently said to me, it's unavoidable now because of all this lack of norms, lack of money, lack of faith, lack of humanity, that we must remake the way we deal with people in the world. So it's not just about mediating conflicts anymore, albeit that's super important, but it's about trying to reflect on what is the value of aid, humanitarian development. We clearly haven't made the case very successfully because it's so easily ripped away from us by these decisions. What does it bring in terms of a joined humanity? What does it bring, therefore, in terms of security? Because, of course, people like me would say that actually aiding people and allowing them to engage with their unexpected neighbors and demonstrating that there is a future, all the things you've reported on, and that enhances security. But crucially, and I think this is where the future comes, what is the reset that we want to see? What kind of aid structure do we want to see? Do we still want to see the same big agencies and small local deliverers? Do we want to see a way in which humanitarian development isn't separated by mandate and beliefs and people?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we're seeing at the moment, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that there is an attempt by taking away aid to sort of burn things down, but we aren't really seeing an attempt to reform and rebuild.
No, we're not. And the worry that I have, and I think you have, is that at the moment, with all the onslaught of these different decisions, as you say, it's not just US, UK, I think Netherlands has done the same, and we see it more broadly. It's partly a reset to the global south and the new donors. It's partly a reset to the new donors who actually host governments in the places of need. But what we don't see at the moment is a preparation in the leadership of humanitarian development agencies to see the way out. Because, of course, they're absolutely frantically and correctly focused on what's going to happen to their programs. Waivers from Washington are now ignored, given a few weeks ago and now ignored, and money's not delivered. People are sacked or furloughed or suspended. They don't know what's happening. So the panic, understandably, is on survival now.
Yes, and we talked there about those leading these programs, but has that message about the cutting of aid and these programs reached those that it was serving, essentially?
I think it's beginning to. You know, it's interesting the time taken to get from turmoil in capitals to the deprived need in cities and villages and deserts across the world. But it's getting there now. And it's partly been slowed down, I think, Yalda, by the fact that it's chaos for these agencies. They don't know if they've been cut or not. There was supposed to be a review period. Now we're told there's nobody left in USAID to do reviews. What do we do with our staff? It's total contradictions. So, and I know from being in close contact with many of these agencies that they're just clutching at straws to see what they should do for their own duty of care, not just to their own staff, but to the people that you mentioned.
What do you recommend? I mean, you've had decades of experience in this field. How do you think that, you know, those who are trying to rebuild and rethink what the future should be, what is the kind of messaging they should put out there, and what kind of restructure needs to take place so that, you know, foreign aid, the importance of that, the soft power of that is taken seriously?
Yeah, well, first of all, it should be taken seriously, and that's our fault, I think, because it's not, clearly. I mean, the first resource for the Prime Minister of the United Kingdom was to get rid of aid. I'm not sure how he looked at other sources of income. He needed money, that's clear. So we haven't made the case after these decades since the Second World War. But I think what is needed, Yalda, is indeed an approach which stresses the following new elements, and they are new. Number one, let's not have big agencies from the north. And of course, the UN agencies are the biggest, and they're wonderful people and close friends and do great work. But let's not have them be the dominant power. Let's try to flip the curve. So you have to have a blueprint, I think, to be practical terms, a blueprint which is to be debated, consulted in an iterative way about what is the new business model likely to be? What are the principles upon which it is based? Attention to local people, respect for the global south, the need for funding to come from local sources. Communities do all the work for IDPs. You know that, before the agencies arrive. We can't go back. We're not likely ever to go back to the world that we have lived in these last few years. Aid agencies have grown enormously in their numbers, as you know, and now they're having to cut back because there was a wealth of support. We have to actually look 4 years ahead, not just next year. That's demanding a lot. And who does it? Who can do this? It's not fair to ask individual agencies to do this because their primary interest is survival and duty of care to people they serve.
That was the former UN Aid Chief Martin Griffiths speaking to me there a little earlier. Well, that's all for tonight's programme and the entire week. Anna Botting is up next with the news at 10 and more coverage of the Prime Minister's visit to the White House. Thanks so much for watching. Good night.